our next speaker, this segues nicely into our next speaker's topic. Kate Wittenberg, Managing Director of Portico, will describe to us one of those burgeoning services that attempt to link up papers with data. So, Kate?
Well, good morning. Thanks, everyone. I'm pleased to be here. It would appear that Cliff and I spoke beforehand because he set up so perfectly the context for the project that I'm going to talk about, but we didn't, which I guess shows that we're both hopefully right about where things are going. So you'll see what I mean as I continue. I'm here to talk about a project that is just beginning. We literally found out in early April, that we'd received a grant from the Alfred P. Sloan Foundation to do this project, which we're very tentatively calling the Matchmaker project. That may change. We believe, my partners and I, who are IEEE and the Data Conservancy at Johns Hopkins, that there are going to be very soon these much different, more complex, data-intensive, and differently presented kinds of scholarly publications, probably beginning in the field of journal publishing, and probably beginning in some of the sciences and social sciences first, although we think soon extending to humanities. As scholars are continuing to expand the role of data in the research, it's soon going to begin to be necessary to rethink how that research is presented in publications. And I believe that it's important that we in the publishing, as well as data curation and the preservation communities, develop new approaches and new expertise that can support this work as it moves into these new forms of formal publication. So the goal of the project that I'll tell you about is to actually, in a broad sense, enable this innovation that's happening in scholarly communication and then moving into digital publishing. As Cliff said very well, there are going to be and are currently actually increasing expectations between the publication that's presented in a journal and the underlying data that supports that scholarship. I don't think it's possible for any one segment of our community to take on this project alone, which is why I think this collaboration among publishers, data centers, and preservation organizations is going to be required in order to build tools to help scholars move in these new directions. So the goal of the work that we're going to be undertaking is to preserve not just the publications and the data separately, but to actually preserve the relationships among these increasingly complex and compound objects. I think the article is changing and that we're already seeing these changes, such that the primary unit of communication in the scholarly field is now becoming a multi-part and distributed object. There is the text, there's the underlying data that is sitting in different places and sometimes moving from place to place, separate from the text that's in the published article. There are the computer models that also underlie the argument that the scholar is making, which also may be moving from place to place, either with the scholar, him or herself, or from data center to different labs to different universities. So we're now seeing this complicated, distributed environment of pieces of the scholarship that's going to have to ultimately be presented by the publication. So there's a need to maintain the connections among these various components as they move and as they change over time. And increasingly elaborate information relationships will be necessary if we're going to do this. So the tool that we're going to be developing in this project is what we're calling a graph-based view of connections among publications and the data that supports them. In other words, we're using the word graph to indicate that it's a many-to-many relationship rather than a one-to-one view. So tracking and preservation of these connections through the whole scholarly communication cycle, from the time that an author begins to work on a project that involves data, through the submission of that material to a publisher, through the publication of it, and then through the preservation of the publication and the links to the underlying data, is the cycle that we're hoping to include in thinking through this problem. Now, as I said, this is a partnership that we've developed to do this research. We're working with the Data Conservancy at Johns Hopkins, which has expertise in management of large data archives from many different disciplines. We're working with IEEE as our first partner publisher, although by no means not the only partner publisher, because they have such extraordinary expertise in the management of data-intensive scholarly journal publications and a deep understanding of the changing needs of scholars in this data-intensive field. And then I represent the third piece of the partnership, which is Portico, which is a preservation service, which has expertise in digital preservation, but also the workflow requirements of publishers as they submit their content to be preserved in the dark archive, and many existing relationships with our publishers. Now, the project is designed as a 2-year grant, divided into 2 phases. The year 1 phase is for planning. And during this year, we're going to be gathering requirements to create use cases for the different ways in which data and its publication need to be thought through. We're going to hold a workshop with stakeholders, and by stakeholders I mean really representatives of the whole community, and that includes publisher partners, scholars, preservation organizations, and data archives, to understand what the issues are, what the needs are, and to go forward only after we have a sense of what the community wants from this project. The idea of this work we're doing is not to build something and then hope that everyone will find it to their liking and to serving their needs. Rather, the whole point of year 1 is to gather requirements, to gather feedback, and to understand the needs of the community, and then refine our prototype use cases based on the community's feedback. Year 2 involves actual development of this tool and to create a system that will identify, store, update, and retrieve on an ongoing basis relationships among publications and data. Just one example use case, and there are a number that we're thinking about, but one that comes from the publishing perspective would be if a publisher is at the point of getting ready to publish an article and wants to know if there are reference links to an article, to its author, or to a funding agency that supported the original scholarship that it can include in its publication. In this scenario, once the tool is built, the publisher would submit article metadata and identifiers to the tool, which would then consult this database and return any relationship maps that it finds that have to do with any connections from that article to these other sources of information. And the point of this is that you could re-question the tool over time. You could submit these queries on an ongoing basis every 6 months, every year, and that the relationships would constantly be updated. The project PIs are going to be consulting with and sharing project plans and findings with, as I said, the stakeholders in the publishing, research, and data communities. This project workshop in year 1 is going to test the plans and then refine everything that we're putting into the plan for the prototype. So the final outcomes and deliverables, we hope, from this project will be a working prototype of this tool, a plan for long-term sustainability of the service. And this is important, and this is something actually that the Sloan Foundation wanted to make sure we're thinking about from the beginning. We don't want to build something that then disappears when the grant funding is over. And one of my jobs in the project is to think about business and sustainability planning from the beginning. We have to figure out if this will be housed in one particular organization, either one of the partners' organizations or another in the community, or whether it will be something that will be released out to the community in an open source model, but then will be used enough and supported enough by the community to keep it going. So the sustaining this once it's done is a big part of the project. We want to make sure we have established and continue to develop a real collaborative partnership with the community as we work. And overall, the goal is to create a system that supports the kind of emerging forms of digital scholarship and publishing that Cliff mentioned in his talk. So these are the team members: Saeed Chowdhury at the Data Conservancy at Johns Hopkins, Jerry Grenier at IEEE, and myself at Portico. And again, we're supported by this the Alfred P. Sloan Foundation grant for this 2-year project. If everything goes well, I hope I'll be able to come back and tell you what we've actually done sometime in the future. Thank you very much.